morning, everyone. My name is Megan Stachowiak, and I am a research analyst with the Institute. Back in 2020, the Institute embarked on a research agenda to study the impacts of COVID-19 on our region, including the impacts on health, education, government, industry, and many more topics. We've released a number of studies on our website, and further research updates are in the works to give leaders in our region the critical data and information they need to move our community forward. As you all know, we have been living through unprecedented times. In March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic reached our region, impacting virtually every area of the topics covered in the indicators report. Some data in this year's indicators book reflects these impacts, while for many data points, as Terry mentioned, there is a lag of 12 to 18 months, meaning it will be at least another year until we have a complete data picture of the pandemic as it relates to Northeastern PA. It is also important that we remember that nearly 600,000 Americans have died as a result of COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic, including nearly 27,000 people in Pennsylvania and nearly 1,300 in Lackawanna and Luzerne counties. The pandemic has highlighted the important needs in public health, including impacts of chronic disease, special needs of seniors and long-term care residents, social determinants of health, and how public agencies respond to health emergencies. Vaccination is our most important tool to recovering quickly and effectively as a region. As of late last week, over 7 million Pennsylvanians have received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, representing 55% of the state's population. Pennsylvania ranks 9th among states and DC in the share of the population vaccinated. The Commonwealth ranks 20th in the share of delivered doses that have been given out, which is a measure of the efficiency of vaccine distribution. Supply has now caught up with demand, and a coordinated effort is needed to continue to distribute the vaccine, reduce barriers to vaccination, and provide information and education to those who have not yet been vaccinated.
We have seen strong signs of a recovering economy. The labor market is tightened as businesses are rehiring, and as a result, the region must also focus on building a talent pipeline that meets current and future workforce needs. During the pandemic, we saw an unprecedented spike in the unemployment rate as businesses shut down or modified operations in March and April of 2020. In the months that followed, the unemployment rate saw a slow, steady decline. Throughout the pandemic, wages saw a rapid rate of growth. Growing wages and a declining unemployment rate are signs the economy is getting back to normal sooner rather than later. However, bumps in the road remain. Childcare, education, and transportation challenges are keeping some of the work out of the workforce, and some industries are taking longer to recover than others. Childcare and transportation were pre-pandemic issues exacerbated by COVID. Fear is another factor in keeping some workers out of the workplace, especially those in lower wage jobs that require more public interaction or work in close quarters. Wages are another factor. Those in low wage jobs struggling to make a livable wage, which is over $20 an hour if you have one child, and it increases from there, found some financial solace with the additional unemployment compensation. Having to make less choices among food, housing, and medicines made life easier for some. We still have about 25% of regional households earning less than $25,000 per year. All of this information demonstrates that there is no one reason and no one solution to our workforce issues. As the region comes back from the pandemic recession, innovation and adaptability will be more important than ever. As of 2020, over 9,300 jobs in the two counties were in STEM occupations, and the region has seen a steady investment in new technologies and startup firms. The way work is done is also changing, with big implications for our downtowns, our communities, and the real estate market. In order to keep up with the rapidly evolving economy, We need to ensure that our workforce has the appropriate skills and training to meet current and future demand. Higher education attainment is slightly lower than the statewide rates among local adults, though high school graduation rates are higher. Further, the region has a strong community of higher education institutions who conferred nearly 8,400 degrees in the 2018-2019 academic year in a variety of fields of study. We will need multifaceted solutions to ensure that our workforce has the necessary skills to keep the region competitive, and this includes early childhood education, K through 12, special education, post-secondary education, and continuing education. Last year, the Institute released a study on workforce development in the wake of COVID-19 as part of our Institute Insights on COVID-19 Research Agenda. In it, we examined unemployment and hiring trends during the pandemic to show areas of greatest workforce need. We also explored the impacts of automation and proposed several recommendations shown here for workforce development in a post-COVID world. As we've already heard, there are signs of new population growth and migration into the region since the pandemic. Such a trend, if it is sustained, will have a significant implication for housing and public services. Over the previous decade, population growth had been minimal. Still, the characteristics of the population have shifted, with our communities becoming more racially and ethnically diverse and slightly older on average. The region's population has declined slightly since 2000, despite slow statewide population growth. 10-year net migration, which is the number of people moving into the region minus the number of people moving out of that region, was net negative for the region, though there was a relatively small net positive gain in Luzerne County. As we have heard already, COVID-19 has accelerated population shifts from region to region, and it appears that our region may be poised for new growth as a result, especially from larger, higher cost of living metro areas elsewhere along the eastern seaboard. We do not yet know the scope of this change or to what degree it will be permanent versus temporary. The makeup of the region's population has also changed in recent years. The region has become much more ethnically diverse, with 13.7% of the residents who are non-white compared to just over 3% in the year 2000. The region has also grown slightly older on average, with a 0.5 percentage point increase in seniors 65 or older in the two-county region since the year 2000.
The next theme that we're going to be talking about this morning is social inequities and family economic security. The pandemic and its sudden and severe economic effects brought really significant financial challenges to many families in our region, including some who may never have faced food or housing insecurity before. Nearly half of Pennsylvanians lost work income during the pandemic, and there's evidence that both COVID itself and employment impacts have had uneven effects, widening existing socioeconomic disparities. Even prior to the pandemic, poverty in the region was higher than statewide, with about 1 in 4 children living below the poverty line on average, with some fluctuation from year to year. With nearly half of households experiencing loss of work income between March 2020 and early 2021, many families have struggled to meet basic needs. This spring, 26% of Pennsylvanians reported struggling to pay usual household expenses, 9% faced food insecurity, and 12% of Pennsylvania renters reported being behind on their last month's rent payment. While all of these indicators are lower than they were earlier in the pandemic, it does indicate that ongoing challenges are facing these families as they try and find their footing again. There are over 2,000 tax-exempt organizations within the two-county region, including 600 human services organizations and 400 public and social benefit organizations. So these types of providers play a really key role in addressing poverty and income inequality in our region. And there have been social inequities in many aspects of the pandemic as well. Throughout the United States, COVID-19 illnesses and deaths have disproportionately impacted communities of color, widening existing disparities in public health. There are also racial disparities in vaccination rates, both nationwide and within Pennsylvania. The economic impacts of the pandemic have also disproportionately affected already vulnerable populations. Our analysis of unemployment claims data found that during the pandemic, continued unemployment claims, so long-term employment, were more likely to be from non-white workers than before the pandemic. And also compared to before the pandemic, unemployment filers during the pandemic were much more likely to be women and were younger on average. As we build our region back from disruptions of the pandemic, we need to focus on resilience, evidence-based approaches, and collaboration. The two counties have often had pretty fragmented governance, including 116 individual municipalities. So now is a great time to explore opportunities for meaningful collaboration, like shared service agreements or regional services such as regional policing or emergency services, collaboration between nonprofit organizations and social service providers. In addition to collaboration and effective planning, we also need strong physical infrastructure to be economically competitive and resilient. As we just heard, there's a lot of profound changes to how we work, shop, travel, and do business. The vast majority of commuters in northeastern Pennsylvania use their own private vehicles to get to work, though over 10% of households lack a vehicle. Commercial vehicles, particularly larger trucks, make up a larger share of registered vehicles in the region, and have grown by 147% since the year 2000, compared to a growth in passenger cars of only about 2% during that time. This is due in part of the growing transportation and logistics industry sector in northeastern Pennsylvania. And while air quality in the region has been consistently good, transportation trends do have major implications for air quality as well as greenhouse gas emissions. And we hope that having these 5 overarching questions or ideas have helped to put the data from the indicators report, the Institute's other research, and the task force research into helpful context. These trends that affect our region this year cut across all of the work of so many types of organizations in education, healthcare, business, economic development, and more. As always, we still invite you to explore all of the data contained within this year's indicators report. While today's presentation only touched on some highlights, we believe it's a great repository of information for leaders and organizations in northeastern Pennsylvania.